always fun to learn how to turn on the microphone. Here's the button. I found the button. All right. So I said it's always fun to attend an installation ceremony, and I've been in Rotary for a long time, and I got to tell you that it didn't take me long at all to figure out this is a pretty damn special club, y'all. Yeah. You got a good thing going, and you ought to be very, very proud of what you got, because I don't hear that from most. I've been around, like I said, a while. I don't hear this from most clubs. Congratulations yourself.
And we want to thank Sherry for organizing us and keeping us connected and inviting us down here. And we're staying at a wonderful Marriott that is managed by one of your members. And if you need a place to stay, it's beautiful. And we welcome that reception there. Flight to End Polio was a dream. It was a dream I had back in 2019. I approached my wife and said, "Dear, what do you think about flying a single-engine airplane?" I had a single-engine airplane at that point, around the world. And she looked at me and said, "Sure, honey, you go ahead and plan that." And that's when I figured she was the perfect, found out a year later she was the perfect mom. And we all know what perfect moms, perfect dads are. You don't beat down an idea because it's just dumb and stupid, you know it shouldn't happen. You encourage your kids to explore and do things exciting and discover. Well, when I asked her, I didn't know whether you could fly a single-engine airplane around the world, but after a year of study, I went back and said, here's the plan, here's what I'm doing, and yada, yada, yada. She looked at me and says, "You're serious." And that's when she was the perfect mom. We revealed, she says, "You're not doing it by yourself. Find somebody as crazy as you to do it with you, or you're not doing it." And that's when I called John up, because John's cousin by marriage, and he had 3 airplanes, so I knew it qualified him as being a crazy pilot. But we canceled twice because of COVID. We canceled the 3rd year because the original route was taking us up through Japan, Russia, and Alaska. And with the invasion of Ukraine, we couldn't go that way. And we came down to the route of, we had to change our airplane because the original airplane couldn't handle the flight across the Pacific, and we had to change the route. And as you learned, the route down to Australia, only 30 pilots in history have gone that route because of the danger of flying across the Pacific. We'll give you more details about that. John?
Let's keep moving. You know, we just flashed by this one, or there it is, came back. Everybody knows we named this the Flight to End Polio, because everybody also knows polio is only one airplane ride away. And we saw that in the world, in New York, just a couple years ago, in several other countries as well. Polio was spread again, first time in 30-some years. Well, these pictures are right out of the 1950s, and that's what it was. Iron lungs, people standing in line to get vaccinations. That's where it started. In 1984, 85, polio got involved, Rotary got involved in a big way with polio, trying to eliminate it in the Philippines. That's the start of the initiative we have today. And that initiative took Peter and I from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, to Karachi, Pakistan for our first immunization days on this trip. And that's what we're going to kind of lead into right here, right now.
Of all the pictures that we took on the trip, the one in the upper left-hand corner makes me tear up every time. That was the first child in the ghettos of Karachi, Pakistan, and actually the first child anywhere in the world that I was able to vaccinate. And when you're in that horrific condition of the ghetto in Pakistan especially, and you look at the suffering that's going on when we visit the hospital where they treated children with polio and cared for them. It brought tears to my eyes at the time, and it touches me now to be able to put those drops in the child's mouth and know that that child, because the work that Rotarians all around the world do, and the work that John and I were promoting, that child will never have polio. But John, what's significant about your picture in the bottom center?
Well, other than the fact that it's not a really good shot of my face. Now, this is obviously me inoculating a child as well. And take a look at the lady in the red scarf, because that lady is one of the professional inoculators. And those people, those ladies, and they're all ladies, by the way, in Karachi, are trained to do the inoculations, to keep track of what's going on. And I've got to tell you that the work with World Health, WHO, UNICEF, and Rotary International, they work together as a team I've never seen before. And they work out of the same building in Karachi. They don't worry about having silos and different floors and different rooms. And all. They just work in the same area and they talk to each other. These ladies are hired by that group to do the inoculations. They live in the slums right there with everybody else, because they're gonna go around and they're gonna do these inoculations. They're gonna knock on a door and expect you to bring all the kids out. We're gonna give all the inoculations. We're gonna make some marks on the side of your house. We're gonna tell how many kids were there, how many got their drops, and what's going on, and who this all is. They document it wonderfully. Well, she was the official inoculator. We were obviously doing our thing. But if you notice in this picture, that's a dad holding the baby, okay? We've heard for years that in Pakistan and Afghanistan and throughout that region, the dads really don't take care of the kids. It's just the moms. Dads are just kind of on the outside. And in fact, it was the dads that at one point were the ones who were anti-vaccination totally, okay? That is changing. That's what's this important about this picture. The dads are involved. We had this on a number of occasions where the dads brought the babies out. And I say out because I always bring them out into the streets, okay? All of this happens right in the street. And so, just so everybody understands that that is changing. Also, in Afghanistan and Pakistan, it's the only two places in the world where we still have polio today. But they're fighting it. The Taliban has actively engaged in being proactive in fighting polio. Another massive switch, because not just only a few years ago, it was the Taliban and others that were going around and shooting these ladies we were just looking at, literally, because they didn't want the vaccines coming. That whole regime has changed. There is now strong support, and the two countries are cooperating to get this done. Now, we'll move on.
Well, this is a quote that we often heard from people, that this trip couldn't be done, shouldn't be done, and nobody in their right mind would ever do it. Including our wives in the beginning, who
I agree with you.
totally supported. But, you know, we couldn't have done it without the help of Rotarians completely around the world, and especially the help of our families. And your families here supporting you, and our families did that. Because when we took off out of Cedar Rapids, Iowa on May 5th, my adult daughters, my grandchildren, my wife were in tears. Because they knew what was ahead of us, and they didn't know whether they'd ever see us again. That's, you know, and that's why there's so few people in history. But we were able to do it. And give you a comparison of 7.4 billion people in the world, 4,000 have climbed Mount Everest, 500 been in outer space, and now we're able to say there's 702 pilots in the history of aviation that have taken on this flight and been successful. Fewer than 270 of us are alive today. That's what makes this such a rare event. This was our aircraft. It's a Cessna 210. It's a 1977, and this was landing in Sep, Netherlands. And that's, John made that landing, perfect landing in an international airport.
They were all perfect landings. We got to reuse the airplane every time.
We just haven't had the plane since October because it needed a new engine when we got back. But imagine taking that small plane around the world and how unusual, and we'll tell you how cramped it was when we talk about some of our longest flights.
This is our office. And when we talk about this, we told you that it's a 1977 model airplane, so it's not new by any means, but it's a very common age for airplanes, especially privately owned airplanes. This airplane has been rebuilt a couple times. The whole instrument panel is all new. It's all electronic, it's GPS, and we're going to remember the fact that it's all electronic, lots of electricity in this airplane. Everything in that panel is navigation and communications, okay? It's all redundant, several places throughout that panel. The lower left-hand corner is my iPad, and literally a mini iPad 4 clips on a little clip. Everything in that panel is also in that iPad, all working off GPS, and that's our backup to our backup to our third backup. So, and it does work. So, but again, this panel, highly reliable, highly redundant. That's the primary reason we bought this specific airplane.
This is a video from Brisbane International. Hopefully we can hear it.
I told my wife I was going to plan it, and she said, "You're not doing it by yourself. You better find somebody else as crazy as you to go on this flight." 39 stops around the world in 21 different countries.
We did all of our planning, and we found out on the first day we could take all that planning and throw it out the window.
One of the most powerful moments of this trip was when we were working in the ghettos of Karachi, Pakistan, knowing that you've given that child a chance to be polio-free the rest of their life. It brought me to tears. The number one goal of this trip is to get home to our families alive. If the plane decides not to cooperate, then we'll put it in the water, hopefully next to a freighter that's going by, and we'll start again on another adventure.
That statement came back to being, really? If we have a problem with the plane, you put it in the water. When you take survival training, what they say is you find a freighter, you land 5 miles ahead of a freighter because that's how long it takes it to stop so it can rescue you, and you'll be okay. Well, first you got to survive the impact of the ocean, which is not always that high. But John, I know you've got 10 fingers, but how many ships did we see? We traveled 30,000 miles, 60% over the open ocean. John, how many ships did we see?
Well, we can tell you that once we got out of port, or away from the ports, it was easy to count because it was exactly 0. We never saw a ship in the ocean unless we did see a couple in the North Atlantic when we were in shipping lanes. This flight was almost entirely off of the normal shipping lanes. One of the things I want to go back to that we kind of glossed over, we said that we changed airplanes after we got evicted from Russia. When Russia invaded Ukraine, all UN countries were evicted from Russia. The United States is a UN country. The airplane's a US registered airplane, and they canceled our visas and our reservations and everything. The only way we could go, instead of going off of Russia, which is only a 3-hour flight from Andorra, Russia, to Nome, Alaska, with 1 hour over the Bering Sea. That's how everybody goes that way. We had to go to the southern tip of Australia. And as you look down at the bottom of that map, you'll see that there are stops that are kind of close together. So New Caledonia is the first one off Australia. New Caledonia is 8 hours from Australia. The same with Fiji, and then to Pongo. Okay, and it was like that all the way up, 8 to 10, 12 hours at a time. We couldn't do that in the airplane Peter had. We could not carry enough gasoline to make that part of the flight. So we also had to not only not go through Russia into a different route, we had to buy a different airplane. There's only a couple of models of airplanes that are single engine that had the capacity to lift the weight that we needed to lift, because we were carrying, instead of 90 gallons of gasoline, we were carrying 280 gallons of gasoline in the airplane. Okay? A Cessna 210, which is identical to the airplane, literally, that airplane is literally identical to the airplane that I owned in my business for 28 years, right down to the same make, model, and color. Okay? That has nothing to do with why we bought the airplane. Everything to do with the performance of the airplane. Peter's airplane was also a great airplane. It was a low-wing Piper airplane, but it needed to carry an additional 500 pounds of gasoline, which you couldn't do. So that's what we did. With the short notice, Peter sold his airplane. I sold the airplane that I owned at that time. Together, we bought this airplane.
When we took off of Pango, American Samoa at 4:30 in the morning, which we'll talk about a little bit more, we were 1,000 pounds over gross takeoff weight.
Over maximum legal gross takeoff weight.
So this is our route. We took off Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and headed to the east over the North Atlantic, which we'll talk about a little bit, through Europe, down to Jordan. Now, we canceled 3 times because of COVID in Russia. This year we would have been canceled because Jordan shut down because of the conflict going on the Gaza Strip and with Israel right now. So we wouldn't even be able to do the trip this year.
And we'd have to watch out for volcanoes in Reykjavik.
Reykjavik, because there are exploding volcanoes there. So a lot of hurdles to come, and to deal with all those government agencies and getting all the legal things out of the way was a huge problem. This is some of the basic numbers we kind of highlighted. Only 246 single engines. Well, go to the top, there's 318 flight crews, 143 solo flights, for a total of 461 flights. There's 431 males, 32 females, 246 single engine airplane, and then you see the east route, which is the most popular, is 307. The least popular route, other than the north and south poles, the southern route of 30. So we're part of the 30. that took the dangerous route down south. But here's our numbers: 30,000 miles, 2 pilots, 1 engine, 37 landings, 19 countries, 180 hours in the air. Along the full entire flight, we had over 24 fundraisers that we attended, and we spent 90 days on the trip. Now, you know, John and I, and hopefully it's not offensive down south here, but when we originally planned this, we said, how much can 2 old farts raise flying around the world? And we didn't know how we were going to raise it.
Well, we had a goal.
We had an estimate. We decided, what, $10,000?
That's what we wanted.
So we said, well, if we raise $10,000 for Rotary, then we know that the Bill and Gates Foundation would match it 2-to-1. And so that'd make it $30,000. We said, that's a pretty good fundraiser for going around the world. Well, we didn't reach our goal. Well, we did reach our goal, but it didn't end up being our goal. I should say we are now a certain navigator diploma, which is, we are literally in the aviation history books. But not for our fundraising, but for the flight. But our fundraisers is also the goal because we have raised more than all the pilots who have flown around the world. We have raised more money than any other flight around the world. We are now over $2 million that we've raised.
That does include the Gates match, but even before that, we're going to tell you it's over $700,000 actually U.S. cash that was raised. And with Gates, that puts it well over $2 million.
And we're
We used to be a
continuing to
little
raise
sketchy
money.
about that. We're not sketchy about that anymore because those funds are still coming in.
Yeah, you'll be asked to donate to fight polio. And what's neat about this fundraiser is every dollar that's donated, especially through Rotarians, gets credited to the member, to the club, to the district, and the zone. Of all that money, you won't see our name on probably a single dollar because it all feeds through the club. It's a great fundraiser for the Polio Foundation and for your club.
How many people here are members of the Paul Harris Society where you promise to donate $1,000 a year? See, one donation to this will cover that, just well, by the way. You'll get all the recognition yourself, and Rotary gets $3,000.
But even more than fundraisers, how many have been involved in fundraisers, or better yet, how many have gotten telemarketer calls every day on the phone saying, hey, we're from this organization, and you're saying, yeah, I've heard about how much you
We're
give
not
to your
disclosing
organization.
the contract.
Yeah, say what?
We're not disclosing the contract again.
Oh yeah, we got a Rotary special contract with Rotary. John and I are paying 100% of all the expenses of this flight. That means every single dollar of that $2 million goes to the Rotary Foundation to go to vaccinate children around the world. And John and I were talking before we left how amazed we are that the life of this flight. We literally thought we'd come home and that would be it. We have over 100+ speeches around the world on the books. Just a few weeks ago, somebody were at the international conference. We spoke to over 10,000 people there. We're going to another club tomorrow. We're going to California. We spoke a Zoom call to 24 people in 24 countries a couple months ago. We're booking speeches now into April and March of next year. We're going to Alaska. We're going to, somebody wants us to come South America to talk because they want to hear this story.
I heard a rumor we might even be going to Kansas.
Kansas, yeah. And 100% of the travel to that, John and I are picking up. So that's why we appreciate when you donate. You help us with the hotel accommodations. Well, this is our gear, the survival gear, across the North Atlantic. And our first flight was 8 hours, 8 minutes from Newfoundland to Goose Bay. Tell us briefly about the flight over the over
Yeah,
Greenland.
absolutely. You've all seen these horror stories about airplanes flying over the North Atlantic, and all you can see is fog and snow and ice and rain, and the waves down there are about 40 feet in the air and all that. Well, those are just stories. Those waves were only 30 feet high when we crossed. Yeah, but it really was. By the time we got to Reykjavik, Iceland, we were 10 days behind schedule because of weather and some maintenance issues, mechanical issues. When we left Goose Bay, finally, we were out the end of the runway, got caught in a snowstorm on the end of the runway as we were taxiing back in. But when we finally left Goose Bay to go to Reykjavik, we skipped Greenland entirely because we couldn't land in Greenland. And we didn't need to land there anyway for fuel, so we went ahead and kept going. This was 8 hours. If you look there, you'll see that there's a green line coming out of Goose Bay and down the lower left corner. That's where radar had us. We had radio communications and radar and all that, satellite coverage. 60 or 70 miles out, we lost all of our radio coverage, and we were having to communicate by talking to airliners going overhead who relayed the signal, and it stayed that way till we got almost all the way to Reykjavik, Iceland. So nobody knew where we were, because there was no, even though we were being covered on a couple of different satellite things, we thought we were being covered across the oceans. We weren't.
We learned
And we found out
bigger.
now we're not.
Bigger.
So nobody knew where we were.
Yeah. And we remember that cockpit with all the electronics and how important our navigation communication was. This was one of, I claim, our first emergency out of Brisbane, Australia. Quickly, John, what do we have?
Well, what we got here is, you'll see that kind of wiggly line on top. We took off out of Brisbane. We were dancing around some thunderstorms in the area, but most importantly, as well as that, around other traffic. Our airplane was so heavy that we could only climb a few hundred feet a minute instead of 1,000 feet a minute or 750 normal. And so we had to kind of pick our way through stuff. And they did all that for us. They helped us out. And we got out there. We were out there about an hour and a half or so, and all of a sudden, this big kind of red bar on the front of the dash is measuring our electrical power, our amps. It went from green to red. Red's never a good thing in an airplane, just so we can be clear on that. That meant that our alternator had broke again. That put us down for a week on our very first landing in New Hampshire. Well, so we called the folks back in Brisbane and said, hey, we're coming back. And you can see the line back is really nice and straight. That's because if we would have, when we did lose that alternator, we went to a backup, which isn't as powerful. But if we lost that second backup alternator, well, then we're really going to be in trouble, because the battery doesn't have enough power to last with that panel for much more, about a half hour at the most.
That's an 8-hour flight.
Yeah, in New Caledonia.
New Caledonia. So another 2 hours out, we've been over open water with no place to land and no communication and no navigation.
You remember that iPad I was talking about? That iPad was about to become our primary navigation source again.
Then when you talk about flying, you know, on the internet, I stole this off the internet. I mean, you steal everything off of there. This is the world's longest non-stop commercial flight, and they brag about it. The first one, Perth to London, 17 hours 20. Houston to Sydney, 17:30. Auckland to Doha, 17:40. And finally, Singapore, 18 to 41. When we flew to Singapore, we flew nonstop. My wife and I flew nonstop from San Francisco to Singapore. And the pilots of this great big beautiful plane would have 3 flight crews, food on board, showers on board, all this. They're bragging in the cockpit to everybody back in the seats. This is one of the top 3 longest flights in the world, and you know, yada yada yada, 7 hours. And I'm thinking, oh really? So when the pilot came back out through my section, I said, excuse me, sir, I was hearing you brag about your flight. I hand him one of these cards that are on your table. See that? That's my airplane. Well, he says, that's cute. I said, you want to brag about your 17 hours? We fly longer than that across the Pacific. And to give you how comfortable it was, if you were to reposition your chairs and put them right side by side, that's how much room we had in the cockpit. And that's why when we flew across the Pacific, we could not stand up, move around, get up, go anywhere. We were sitting there. And that was our longest flight, 17 hours, 49 minutes. Across from Pago Pago to America Samoa, in and out of storms. And again, if you look at that screen, you see a dawn in Pago Pago. We took off at 4:30 in the morning. We lost communication with the airport at another island, where we went around a mountain 30 seconds after takeoff. So at 4:30 and a half, we lost communication. Next time we communicated with the outside world was 60 miles outside of Honolulu at 11 o'clock at night.
We're going to have to skip forward a couple slides here. Let's go forward about 3 or 4 slides.
Okay. So what's important about
Yeah,
October
skip this one,
27th?
too.
You want to skip that one?
Yeah.
October 27th is the last date that smallpox was ever infected a child. 3 years later, it was declared,
Keep going.
the world was declared smallpox free.
Thanks.
And because of time, I need to ask you all a question. How many of you have hope that we're going to see the end of polio someday? Raise your hand. John, they haven't heard the message.
But I can help them out here.
Help them out, John.
Our very first night in Karachi, we were told that we're going to have a big conference from these 3 organizations I'm talking about, WHO, World Health Organization, UNICEF in Rotary. And sure enough, first thing the next morning, they take us across town and this office building, and everybody's there, lots of press, everything going on. They spent a couple hours telling us how this thing is working, why it's working, what they're doing, and what's good about it. When they got done with that, they looked across and said, oh, now we're gonna have a press conference. Okay, fine, we trained around the end of the table. And one of the reporters on the other end was apparently the lead the lead TV guy. And he looks right at Peter and he says, now Captain Teahen, you've just heard all this information about how Rotary's coming around the world and doing all this stuff with polio. Do you still have hope that we're gonna see the end of polio in your lifetime? And I've never seen Peter at a loss for words.
I didn't know what to say. I've been like you, sitting on the chairs, you know, they ask us, Rotary, do you have hope? You read about Rotary, we have hope. And this reporter just asked me, we just vaccinated kids. We're flying around the world raising awareness and money to eradicate polio. But he asked me, do I have hope, still have hope? And after a long pause, I had to look at him and said, I have to be honest. After flying around the world and after vaccinating kids and after hearing this report, I no longer have hope. I no longer have hope that we're going to see the end of polio. Every Rotarian in that room fell off their chair. The media perked up because they were excited. This is breaking news. Rotary these people representing Rotary no longer have hope. And after that frenzied pause, settled down a little bit, I said, I don't have hope. I believe. And I said, I believe is a much more powerful word than hoping. And I said, I want you to tell every reader, every listener that you see around the world that Rotary is no longer hoping, we're believing. Because if we don't believe, then how can we get everyone else in the world to believe in our mission? And know that now's not the time to give up. We have heard so much around the United States. I didn't know polio existed anymore. We say, oh yeah, it's affecting kids. We've seen it, we do it. But we believe that together we will end this. And it'll be a very short time. And what John and I are asking from each of you, whenever anybody asks you if you have hope, you say no. We believe.
Thank you.
And we will end. Thank you.